Imagine having a superpower, one that lets you cut through all that information overload, instantly grasp complex topics, and, discover those surprising facts that make you truly well-informed. That, right there, is pretty much the mission of this deep dive. Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is the show where we take your sources, your articles, research, notes, whatever you've got, and we distill them down into the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight. And it's custom tailored just for you. We're here to be your expert guides, really helping you understand what truly matters in the material you've shared with us.
And today, we're diving into the incredibly powerful world of Adobe Photoshop. Our insights are mostly coming from the Adobe Photoshop Classroom in a Book 2020 guide, which is, a really foundational text for anyone looking to get started or even deepen their skills. But this isn't just about editing photos, it's really about understanding the core capabilities of an industry standard tool. A tool that touches, pretty much everything from digital art to web design and even, surprisingly, 3D printing.
Okay, so our mission today in this deep dive is to unpack the fundamental concepts and, honestly, the surprising versatility of Photoshop. We want to give you a really comprehensive understanding, its workflow, its tools, its creative potential. And we want to do it without getting totally bogged down in jargon. The goal is for you to walk away with a clear picture, how Photoshop works, why certain techniques are just essential, and how you can apply these powerful ideas. Whether you're just curious or maybe prepping for a big creative project.
Exactly. Let's jump right in.
All right, where do we start? The foundation.
The absolute foundation. To really get Photoshop, you first need to grasp a core concept in computer graphics. It's the difference between bitmap images, sometimes called raster images, and vector graphics. And this isn't just a technical detail, it fundamentally changes how images behave, how they scale, how you should approach your work. It's crucial.
Okay, bitmap. That's what most people think of, right? Like a photo from your phone.
Precisely. Think of that photo or an image you grab from the web. It's basically a grid, thousands, millions sometimes, of tiny dots called pixels. Each one has a specific spot, a specific color. It maps out the image, creating those continuous tones you see in photographs.
Right, little squares of color all lined up.
Yep, and bitmap images are perfect for that kind of thing, photorealistic stuff. Images with subtle color shifts, gradients, detailed digital paintings, a landscape photo, for instance. But here's the catch. They have a fixed number of pixels.
So if you try to make it bigger.
Exactly. If you try to enlarge a bitmap beyond its original size, Photoshop has to essentially invent new pixels. It has to guess.
And the result is usually not great. Blurry, blocky, pixelated.
That familiar jagged look, loss of detail. That's the disadvantage.
Okay, so that's bitmap. What about the other kind? Vector.
Right. Vector graphics operate completely differently. They aren't made of pixels at all. Instead, they're built from lines and curves defined by mathematical equations. Vectors. Think of it like instructions. Draw a line from here to here, make this curve and set.
Oh, okay. Math, not dots.
Exactly. This makes them absolutely ideal for things like illustrations, typography, text is almost always vector, and especially logos. And the huge advantage, scalability. Because they're math, they retain perfect sharpness and detail at any size.
Any size, really?
Any size. You can take a vector logo from a tiny icon on a website to a massive billboard, and it will look perfectly crisp. No jagged edges, no blurriness.
Wow, okay, that's a huge difference. So for branding, logos, that kind of thing, vector is the way to go.
Absolutely essential. Designing a logo as a bitmap is a common mistake, and it leads to exactly those problems. Blurry banners, fuzzy print materials. Understanding this difference saves so much headache later on.
And Photoshop can handle both.
Yes, and that's one of its strengths. It can actually combine both bitmap and vector data in a single file, which gives you incredible flexibility. You might have a photo background, bitmap, with vector text or shapes layered on top.
Got it. So understanding the basic difference, pixels versus math, really guides how you work and what results you can expect, especially for print or web.
It dictates everything right from the start.
Okay, so we understand the basic building blocks. Now let's step inside Photoshop itself, the workspace. It can look a bit intimidating at first.
It can, yeah. But the default setup is actually quite logical once you know your way around. Typically, you've got the menu bar up top, then the options bar just below it, which changes depending on the tool you've selected. Then usually on the left, you have the main tools panel. And over on the right, you'll see various panels docked together, things like layers, swatches, properties.
And that home screen that pops up when you launch it.
Right, the home screen. It's designed for quick access opening cloud documents, recent files, creating new projects, but you can easily skip it if you want. Just click the little Photoshop icon in the top left. or get back to it anytime using the home icon.
And those panels on the right, layers, properties, etc., they're not static, right? They change.
Exactly. They're dynamic. They provide context-sensitive options and controls for whatever you're working on at that moment. If you select a text layer, the Properties panel shows text options. Select an image layer, it shows image properties. It's very efficient.
And you can customize this layout, move things around.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the great things. You can, for instance, toggle the Tools panel between a single column or a double column view, whatever fits your screen or preference. Need more space to see your image, just hit the Tab key, poof. All the panels disappear, tools, options bar, everything. Hit Tab again, they all come back.
Nice shortcut.
Super useful. And you can undock any panel, drag it anywhere, group panels together in different ways, save your custom workspace setups. You can even change the interface color theme in preferences, make it darker, lighter, whatever feels comfortable for you.
And selecting tools from that panel on the left, just click.
Just click the icon. Usually a little tooltip pops up telling you the name of the tool and its keyboard shortcut, like Z for the zoom tool, V for the move tool.
And many are just single letters. No Ctrl or command needed.
Many of the most common ones, yes. Single key shortcuts. It makes switching tools really fast once you learn them. And if you really want to fine-tune it, you can even customize the Tools panel itself using the Edit Toolbar icon. Add tools you use often, remove ones you never touch.
So setting up this workspace, this sort of command center, is pretty key for workflow.
It makes a massive difference. Getting it set up efficiently saves so much time and frustration. It lets you focus on being creative, not hunting for buttons.
Okay, speaking of avoiding frustration, mistakes happen, especially when you're learning or experimenting. How does Photoshop help with that? The undo feature.
The safety net. Yes, this is absolutely crucial and frankly quite liberating. Photoshop basically encourages you to experiment because its undo system is so robust.
So the classic Ctrl plus Z or Command plus Z.
That's your first line of defense, yes. It undoes the very last thing you did instantly.
And if you undo too much?
There's redo. Ctrl plus Shift plus Z or Command plus Shift plus Z, it reapplies the action you just undid, so you can step back and forth easily between the last two states.
But what if you made a mistake like 10 steps ago?
That's where the History panel comes in. It's incredibly powerful. Go to Window History. What you get is a list, a visual record of pretty much every single step, every edit you've made since you opened the document in that session.
Well, like a time machine for your edits.
Pretty much. You can click on any state in that list, and your entire image reverts back to how it looked at that exact point. You can step back multiple steps, try something different, then maybe even step forward again.
That's amazing. So you can really explore different ideas without fear.
Exactly. And there's another neat trick, the toggle last state shortcut. That's CRL plus Alt plus Z or Command plus Option plus Z. It quickly flips between your current state and the state just before your last action. It's perfect for doing a quick before and after comparison, like did that filter really improve the image? Zap back and forth to see instantly.
So this whole undo system, the History panel, it really removes the fear factor.
Completely. It allows you to learn, to push boundaries, to try absolutely anything, knowing you can always rewind. It makes the creative process truly boundless.
Okay, foundation's covered. Workspace setup, undo safety net deployed. Let's get into the practical stuff, fixing photos. Where do most people start? Red eye.
Red eye is a classic, yeah. Especially with flash photos in dark rooms where the flash bounces off the retina because pupils are wide. Photoshop makes this incredibly easy. There's a dedicated red eye tool. It's usually nested under the spot healing brush tool. You just select it, click on the red part of the eye, or drag a little box around it.
It just fixes it.
Pretty much instantly. It detects the red and neutralizes it, making the eye look natural again. Super simple, super effective.
Okay, red eye sorted. What about general brightening? Or fixing colors that look a bit off?
Right. Photos often need a bit of tweaking for brightness, contrast, or color balance, and this is where we really lean into non-destructive editing using adjustment layers.
Non-destructive meaning you're not changing the original photo pixels.
Exactly. You're adding a separate layer on top that applies the adjustment. You can change the adjustment later, hide it, delete it, whatever. The original image data remains untouched underneath. It's the professional way to work.
Makes sense. So what kind of adjustment layers are common for this? Curves? Levels?
Those are two of the most powerful and commonly used, yes. Let's take curves first. You add a curves adjustment layer. For a quick fix, you can hit the auto button or try presets like lighter, but the real power comes with manipulating the curve itself. And even better, there's an on-image adjustment tool. Looks like a little hand with arrows.
Okay, what did that do?
You click and drag directly on the image. Say you want to brighten the shadows in a specific area, click on that shadowy area and drag upwards. You'll see a point added to the curve in the panel, and the image brightens in those specific tones in real time.
So you adjust by interacting with the image itself, not just the graph.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
very intuitive. Same for darkening. Click a bright area and drag down.
Cool. And levels, how does that work?
Levels gives you control over the overall tonal range, the darkest blacks, the brightest whites, and the midtones. One really useful tool within levels is the white point eyedropper. You find an area in your image that should be neutral, white, or light gray, maybe a white shirt, a cloud, a piece of paper. Click on it with that eyedropper.
And what happens?
Photoshop analyzes the color you clicked and assumes, okay, this should be neutral. It then adjusts the entire image's color balance to remove any color cast based on that point, and often brightens things up too. You can try clicking different points to see which gives the best result.
So you're telling Photoshop what white should look like in the image.
Precisely. And you can also adjust the main sliders in the levels histogram. There are black, gray, and white triangles. Dragging the black triangle inwards makes the darkest parts darker. Dragging the white triangle inwards makes the lightest parts lighter. This controls the overall contrast.
And there was a tip about holding a key.
Right. Hold down the Alt key, or Option on Mac, while dragging the black or white triangles. This shows you a clipping preview. It highlights areas that are becoming pure black or pure white, meaning you're losing detail there. It helps you set the points precisely without losing important information.
Got it. So curves and levels adjustment layers are great for quick, non-destructive fixes for brightness, contrast, and color casts.
Absolutely. They're your go-to for improving snapshots quickly before sharing them, making sure details aren't lost and colors look natural.
And you mentioned sharpening is usually last.
Generally, yes. Sharpening enhances edge definition, but it can also amplify noise or artifacts. So you usually do all your tonal and color corrections first, then apply sharpening as a final step. Tools like the Smart Sharpen filter give you lots of control over amount, radius, and even masking to protect certain areas.
Okay, that covers the basic tune-ups. What about more involved stuff? Retouching, removing blemishes, fixing old photos.
The art of retouching. Yeah, Photoshop has an amazing suite of tools for this, and understanding the subtle differences between them is key. It really raises the question, which tool do you pick
This
for which
audiobook
job?
is
All right,
brought
let's
to
break
you
them
by
down.
Sunil Sharma,
Spot healing brush.
dedicated
Okay,
designer.
spot healing brush. Think quick fixes for small problems. Blemishes, stray hairs, little dust spots on a scan. Its magic is that it samples the pixels around the area you click or paint over. It tries to match the texture, lighting, shading, transparency automatically, and the content-aware mode is often the default, and usually works wonders. You don't even need to tell it where to sample from. It just figures it out.
So, point and click for small stuff.
Pretty much, yeah. Super fast for minor imperfections.
Okay, what about the regular healing brush, not the spot one?
Good distinction. The regular healing brush works similarly. It blends texture, lighting, etc. But you have to define the source pixels first. You hold down Alt or Option and click on a clean area you want to sample from. Then you paint over the area you want to fix. It gives you more control over where the healing information comes from.
Right, so more deliberate than the spot healing brush. What if the thing you want to remove is bigger? Like a whole person in the background?
Okay, for larger removals, the patch tool, especially in content-aware mode, is often your best bet. With the patch tool, you draw a selection around the object you want to remove. Then you literally drag that selection over to a clean area of the image that you want to use as the replacement patch.
And Photoshop just blends it in.
It does a remarkably good job, especially with content-aware mode selected. It analyzes the edges and blends the patch seamlessly with the surrounding content. Great for removing distracting elements.
Okay, that sounds powerful. Then there's the clone stamp tool. How is that different?
The clone stamp is more direct. It doesn't try to blend texture and lighting like the healing tools. It exactly copies pixels from one area to another. You Alt-Option click to define your source point, just like the healing brush. But when you paint, it's a direct pixel for pixel copy.
So when would you use that instead of healing?
It's great for rebuilding areas with specific patterns or structures where you need an exact match. Think fixing architectural details, replicating a pattern in fabric, or filling in missing areas in a badly damaged photo where you need to precisely reconstruct something from another part of the image.
Got it. Healing blends, clone stamp copies exactly, and there was a filter for dust and scratches.
Yes, the Dust and Scratches filter. It's specifically designed for cleaning up scanned images that might have lots of tiny specks or fine scratches. You adjust sliders for radius, how big the flaws are, and threshold, how different a pixel needs to be considered a flaw. It tries to remove the noise without blurring the actual image detail too much. Needs careful handling, though.
So choosing the right tool really depends on the specific problem you're trying to solve. Size, type of flaw, level of control needed.
Exactly. Spot healing for quick, small fixes. Healing brush for controlled small fixes. Patch tool for larger removals using surrounding texture. Clone stamp for precise pixel replication. Having this toolkit gives you incredible power for restoration and enhancement.
It's interesting to connect this to how professionals work. You mentioned insights from an art conservator and a photographer.
Yes, Gawain Weaver, the art conservator, makes a great point. Photograph conservation is both a science and an art. He draws parallels between his physical tools and Photoshop's digital ones. Like, physically washing discolored paper is akin to using a curves adjustment layer to digitally remove a color cast. Manually inpainting tiny missing bits with a fine brush. That's like using the spot healing brush for digital dust removal.
Wow, that's a cool comparison.
And repairing a physical tear with delicate Japanese paper and paste. That mirrors using the clone stamp tool to digitally mend creases or tears, carefully rebuilding the image structure. Weaver also notes that for family photos, digital restoration in Photoshop after scanning often yields more dramatic results and far less time than trying to physically fix everything. Plus, the originals can then be safely stored away. Often they'll do some physical cleaning first, then the digital work.
Makes sense. And the professional photographer, Jay Graham, what was his emphasis?
Workflow. His mantra is, good habits make all the difference. He stresses meticulous file naming, using a consistent format like date and subject, like 1 in 1016, 018 0 as 1. This makes files unique and easy to find later. He also recommends sticking to standard naming conventions.
And shooting format, RAW.
Absolutely. Shoot in camera RAW whenever possible. It captures all the sensor data, giving you maximum flexibility for adjustments later, white balance, exposure, color, noise reduction, sharpening without degrading the image quality. JPEGs compress data and throw some away, limiting your editing potential. If you must shoot JPEG, use the highest quality, lowest compression setting.
And organization.
He recommends using software like Lightroom Classic for organizing, renaming files systematically, adding ratings, keywords, metadata, building a searchable, manageable library, especially if you shoot a lot. It's all about efficiency supporting creativity.
So, whether restoring old prints or managing thousands of new digital files, the pros emphasize non-destructive editing and rigorous organization.
Definitely. It preserves options and ensures quality, which leads us naturally to understanding resolution and sizing, another critical piece for professional output.
Right, resolution, measured in PPI.
In Photoshop, yes, pixels per inch. That's the density of pixels within a physical measurement. It's crucial to distinguish this from printer resolution, which is measured in dots per inch, dpi, and refers to how the printer lays down ink.
Okay, so key for the image file, dpi for the printer. And that 100% view in Photoshop, it can look small on modern screens.
It can, yeah, because 100% view means one image pixel maps to one screen pixel. On high-resolution displays with tiny pixels, your image might look physically smaller than you expect at 100%.
So what resolution do you actually need for printing? Is there a rule of thumb?
There is a common industry guideline, especially for traditional offset printing. Aim for an image resolution, PPI. That's about 1.5 to 2 times the printer's halftone screen frequency, measured in lines per inch.
That's an example.
If the print job uses 133 LOPI screen, which is pretty standard for magazines, you'd ideally want your image resolution to be somewhere between 200 PPI or 133 by 1.5, and maybe 266 PPI, 133 by 2. Around 300 PPI is often cited as a safe bet for high-quality print.
But you said printer DPI can be much higher, like 2400 DPI. Does the image PPI need to match that?
No, that's a common misconception. High-resolution printers use multiple tiny dots, DPI, to render a single image tone, so you don't need a 2400 PPI image file. For photographic prints, even on high DPI printers, image resolutions in the 200-360 PPI range are usually perfectly sufficient.
So the takeaway is, ask the printer.
Absolutely. Always consult your production team or print service provider. They'll tell you the exact image resolution they need for the specific job and printing method. It avoids guesswork and potentially costly mistakes.
Okay. What if you have the opposite problem? You have a low-res image, but you need it bigger.
Yeah.
Upscaling.
Right, upscaling or resampling. Photoshop has to create new pixels to enlarge the image. Historically, this often led to soft or blurry results, but newer versions have an algorithm specifically for this, preserve details enlargement. It does a much better job of analyzing the image and intelligently creating new pixels that maintain edge sharpness and detail during enlargement.
And there's a noise reduction slider with it.
Yes, because enlarging can sometimes emphasize noise, that slider helps smooth it out as part of the upscaling process. Bicubic smoother is an older option, but preserved details is generally superior for upscaling.
So understanding resolution is really key to making sure your images look sharp, whether online or in print. It answers that question. Are your images ready for prime time?
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's fundamental.
All right, we've corrected, retouched, and considered resolution. Now, how do we precisely control what gets edited? Selections, right?
Exactly. Selections are the absolute foundation of targeted editing. They let you isolate a specific area of your image, making only that area active for editing, copying, moving, applying effects, whatever you need to do. Mastering selections is mastering precision in Photoshop.
Okay, so there are different tools for making selections, like the marching ants.
Those marching ants show the boundary of your active selection, yeah. And there's a whole arsenal of tools to create them. For basic geometric shapes, you have the marquee tools, rectangular and elliptical. Quick tip, hold Alt Option while dragging to draw from the center out. Hold Shift to constrain to a perfect square or circle.
Useful. What about irregular shapes?
That's where the lasso tools come in. The standard lasso is freehand, just draw around what you want. The polygonal lasso is for straight line segments, click to set corner points. And the magnetic lasso tries to intelligently snap to edges as you draw near them, which can be handy if there's good contrast between your object and the background. You can even combine freehand and straight lines with the standard lasso by holding Alt Option.
Okay, those seem more manual. Are there more automatic ways?
Definitely. The quick selection tool is fantastic. You sort of paint over the area you want to select, and it intelligently finds and follows edges within that area. It's much more intuitive than the old magic wand for complex objects. You can easily add to the selection by painting more or hold Alt Option to subtract. And even more advanced is the object selection tool. You just draw a rough rectangle or lasso around the object you want, and Photoshop uses AI Adobe Sensei to identify the subject within that area and select it for you. Often does a remarkably good job with a single click or drag.
Wow, AI selection and the magic wand. Still useful.
It still has its place, yeah. It selects based on color similarity. You click on a color, and it selects all adjacent pixels that are within a certain color range, defined by the tolerance setting. Higher tolerance selects a wider range of colors. It's good for selecting large areas of flat color, like a sky or maybe a product shot on a plain background. Less effective for complex objects with varying colors.
Okay, so you've made a selection. What can you do with it? Move it.
Yep. Use the Move tool, V key, to drag the selected pixels, or nudge it pixel by pixel with the arrow keys. You can also copy C2RL CMD plus C and paste C2RL CMD plus V, the selection, usually onto a new layer.
Can you resize just the selection boundary itself, not the pixels inside?
Yes, using Select Transform Selection. That lets you scale or rotate the selection outline itself before you, say, fill it or copy from it.
And getting rid of the selection. Deselecting.
Simplest way is Ctrl plus D, CMD plus D on Mac. Or just click anywhere outside the selection with one of the selection tools active. And if you deselect by accident, Select Reselect is your friend.
Important one. Now, selection edges can sometimes look harsh or jagged. How do you smooth those out?
Good question. There are a few ways. First is anti-aliasing. This slightly softens the color transition along the edge pixels of curved or diagonal selections, making them look smoother, less blocky. You usually need to have this option turned on for the tool before you make the selection. It works for tools like the lasso, elliptical marquee, and magic wand.
Okay, subtle smoothing. What about a more noticeable blur, like for blending?
That's feathering. Feathering creates a soft, blurred edge that transitions gradually. You can define the feather amount in pixels before you draw the selection, or you can add feathering to an existing selection using Select Modify Feather. The feathered edge becomes really apparent when you move, copy, or fill the selection. It helps it blend into the background more naturally.
And for really tricky edges, like hair or fur.
Ah, the ultimate challenge. For that, you need the dedicated Select and Mask workspace. It's a whole environment packed with tools specifically for refining complex selections. You can smooth, feather, shift the edge, but the star is the Refine Edge brush. You paint along the edge, especially where there are fine details like hair, and it intelligently analyzes and refines the selection boundary to include those fine details while excluding the background. It takes practice, but it's incredibly powerful. It also has different view modes, like onion skin or viewing on black-white, to help you spot imperfections.
Sounds sophisticated. Is there another way to visualize selections? Quick mask.
Yes. Quick Mask mode is great. You press Q or click the Quick Mask button. Your selection temporarily turns into a semi-transparent red overlay like old-school Rubylith. Areas not selected are red, selected areas are clear. The cool part is you can then use regular painting tools, like a soft black brush, to paint onto this mask to subtract from your selection, or a white brush to add to it. It's a very intuitive way to fine-tune complex shapes. Press Q again to go back to the marching ants view.
Okay, so mastering these different selection tools and refinement techniques is really the key to isolating parts of an image accurately.
It's absolutely fundamental for precise, professional level editing. Knowing which tool to use when and how to refine the edges gives you incredible control.
So if selections let us isolate what we edit, layers let us organize how we edit, right? Especially not destructively.
Precisely. Layers are arguably the single most powerful concept in Photoshop for complex work and non-destructive editing. Think of them, as you said, like stacked transparent sheets. Each element, an image, text, an adjustment sits on its own layer.
And you can edit one layer without affecting the others.
Exactly. That's the core benefit. You can change the text on a text layer without touching the background image. You can apply a filter to one image layer without altering the layers above or below it. It keeps everything separate and manageable.
How do you manage them? Creating new ones, hiding them.
Very straightforward. There's a new layer button in the layers panel. New layers usually appear above the currently selected layer. Each layer has an eye icon. Click it to hide the layer. Click again to show it. You select a layer simply by clicking its name in the panel. Double-click the name to rename it, which is highly recommended for complex projects.
Good tip. And changing the stacking order, like moving something from the background to the foreground.
Just drag the layer up or down in the Layers panel list. The layer order directly controls what appears in front of or behind other elements. It's simple but powerful.
You can also change opacity, make layers semi-transparent.
Yep, each layer has an opacity slider. Reduce the opacity to make the layer partially transparent, allowing layers below it to show through. Great for blending effects, creating watermarks, ghosts, that sort of thing.
And that initial background layer that's often locked.
You can unlock it easily, usually just clicking the little lock icon next to it converts it into a regular layer, giving you full flexibility to move it, apply effects, change its opacity, etc.
Okay, basic layer management seems clear. But then there are blending modes. What do they do?
Blending modes. This is where layers get really creative. Each layer, except the bottom one, has a blending mode setting which defaults to normal. Changing the blending mode affects how the pixels on that layer interact or blend with the pixels on the layers underneath it.
Interact how? Like math again?
Essentially, yes. Each mode uses a different mathematical formula to combine the color and brightness values of the pixels. There are categories, modes that generally darken the result, like multiply, color burn, modes that lighten, screen, color dodge, modes that increase contrast, overlay, soft light, hard light, and modes that work with color components, hue, saturation, color, luminosity.
Sounds complex. How do you know which one to use?
Honestly, the best way is often just to try them. Click the drop-down menu and cycle through the different modes. You'll see the effect on your image change instantly. Some common uses. Multiply is great for darkening shadows or blending line art onto a colored background. Screen is the opposite, good for highlights, glows, or lens flares. Overlay and soft light are fantastic for boosting contrast and saturation in a pleasing way.
So experimentation is key.
Absolutely. The results depend heavily on the specific content of the layers involved. And a quick note, applying a blending mode to a layer group can sometimes give a different result than applying it to the individual layers within the group. More options for complex effects.
Got it. And we mentioned adjustment layers earlier for non-destructive edits. They fit into this layer structure too.
Perfectly. Adjustment layers are layers. They sit in the layers panel stack like any other layer. Their advantage, again, is they affect the layers below them without permanently changing pixels. You can tweak their settings anytime via the Properties panel.
And you mentioned clipping masks with them to target just one layer.
Right. A clipping mask links an adjustment layer, or any layer, really, to the single layer directly below it. So the adjustment only affects that one layer, not everything underneath. You create it by Alt-Option, clicking on the line between the two layers in the Layers panel, or using the button in the Properties panel. Super useful for targeted corrections.
Okay, layers seem incredibly flexible. What happens when you're finished? Flattening.
Flattening is the process of merging all your visible layers down into a single background layer. The main reason to do it is to significantly reduce the file size, which can be useful for sharing or final delivery.
But there's a big warning sign here, right?
Yeah. Huge E warning sign. Once you flatten an image, you cannot edit the individual layers anymore. All that non-destructive flexibility is gone.
So, best practice.
Always save a version of your file with all the layers intact before you flatten. Save your working file, example, myprojectworking.psd, then do a save as to create a flattened copy, e.g. myproject.web.jpg if needed. Never overwrite your layered master file by flattening it.
You can even see the file size difference.
Yep, the document size shown at the bottom of the Photoshop window will usually drop dramatically after flattening, confirming the layers are gone.
So layers, flexibility, non-destructive power, organization. Flattening, smaller file size, but loss of editability.
You've got it. Layers are the
designer.
absolute backbone of sophisticated Photoshop work. They give you the freedom to refine endlessly.
And to add extra polish easily. Layer style.
Layer styles, yes, these are fantastic. They're automated, prepackaged effects you can apply directly to a layer. Things like drop shadows, outer glows, inner shadows, bevels and embossing, color overlays, strokes, outlines, satin sheens, lots of options.
And they're non-destructive too.
Completely. They're linked to the layer, not baked into the pixels. You apply them via the Layer Style dialog box. Double-click the layer in the Layers panel or use the X button at the bottom. You can tweak all the settings, turn individual effects on or off, or remove the style entirely at any time.
So you could easily add, say, a white border around a photo.
Easily. Just add a stroke layer style, set the color to white, choose the size and position inside, center, or outside the layer edge. Done. Or add a subtle drop shadow to make text pop off the background.
Yeah.
And a huge time saver. You can copy layer styles from one layer to another. Just hold Alt, Option, and drag the little X icon from the styled layer onto the target layer in the Layers panel. It instantly applies the exact same effects.
Nice. Can you apply gradients and filters this way too?
You can apply gradients to a layer using the Gradient tool or the Gradients panel, filling the layer or a selection with a smooth color blend. Filters, like Gaussian blur or render clouds, are typically applied directly to pixel layers, or ideally as smart filters to smart objects for non-destructive results, rather than as layer styles. But you can certainly apply layer styles on top of a layer that has had filters or gradients applied.
So layer styles are like a quick toolkit for adding depth, dimension, and polish without manual effort.
Exactly. They're your secret weapon for making elements look more professional and visually interesting with just a few clicks. Huge time saver for common effects.
Okay, we've fixed, selected, layered, styled. Now let's get into some really transformative stuff. Distorting reality. The liquify filter sounds intriguing and maybe a little dangerous.
It can be both. The liquify filter is incredibly powerful. Its purpose is to let you push, pull, rotate, reflect, pucker, and bloat the pixels of an image, but often in a very controlled way, targeting only specific parts.
And it can recognize faces now.
Yes, the face-aware liquify feature is pretty remarkable. When you open liquify on an image with faces, it automatically detects facial features: eyes, nose, mouth, jawline, forehead. Then you get specific sliders to adjust things like eye size, height, width, distance apart, nose height and width, mouth smile, upper lip, lower lip width, etc. You can make subtle tweaks incredibly easily. There's even a face tool right in the liquify window that lets you click and drag directly on the features to adjust them.
So subtle portrait retouching.
That's a primary use case, yeah. Designed for subtle, believable distortions. But liquify also has manual tools forward warp, like pushing pixels with your finger, pucker shrinks, bloat expands. With these, you can go way beyond subtle. You can create exaggerated caricatures, reshape objects entirely, make someone look like an alien. It works on any part of the image, not just faces.
So you could use forward warp to, say, slightly close someone's eyes if they blinked a bit, or bloat to make eyebrows look fuller.
Exactly. Or pucker to make something smaller. It's incredibly versatile, from fine-tuning portraits to creating completely fantastical effects.
And can you do this non-destructively too?
Yes. Best practice is to convert your layer to a smart object before going into liquify. Then, when you apply the filter, it becomes a non-destructive smart filter. You can go back later, double-click the filter in the Layers panel, and readjust your liquify settings without degrading the image.
Very cool. So liquify is powerful for both subtle refinement and extreme transformation.
Absolutely. A key tool in advertising, fashion, portraiture, and even just for creative fun. It definitely gets interesting.
Speaking of interesting, content-aware features. This sounds like Photoshop getting really smart.
It is. Content-aware technology is where Photoshop uses its intelligence, its algorithms, and AI to analyze the surrounding pixels in an image and then cleverly guess or generate pixels to fill in an area or remove an object seamlessly.
Okay, like magic fill.
Pretty much. The main tool is content-aware fill. Let's say you have a photo with a distracting person or object you want to remove. You select that object loosely, then you go to Edit Content-Aware Fill. A new window pops up. Photoshop analyzes the area around your selection, often showing the sampling area in green, and automatically generates a preview of what it thinks should fill the hole.
And does it usually get it right?
Often, it's astonishingly good, especially with textures like grass, sky, water, or patterned walls. But you also have control. There's a sampling brush tool in that window that lets you tell Photoshop which areas it should or shouldn't sample from to generate the fill. You can refine the source area for better results.
So you can guide its guesswork.
Precisely. It gives you the best of both worlds, automation plus control.
Are there other content-aware tools? Crop.
Yes, content-aware crop is brilliant. You know when you rotate an image to straighten the horizon using the crop tool, you inevitably get transparent, empty, wedge-shaped areas at the corners. If you check the content-aware box in the crop tool options bar before applying the crop, Photoshop will automatically analyze the edges and intelligently fill those empty corners with content that matches the surrounding image. Saves so much time cloning or patching.
That's incredibly useful and content-aware move.
Also very clever, this tool lets you select an object, move it to a different spot in the image, and Photoshop attempts to seamlessly fill the hole where the object used to be using content-aware tech. There's also an extend mode where it tries to duplicate the object and blend it into the new location.
When does that work best?
Again, it tends to work best when the background is relatively consistent. Fields, sky, water, maybe wood grain. It can struggle a bit more with complex backgrounds or sharply angled perspectives. You also get sliders for structure and color adaptation to help fine-tune how well the moved object blends into its new surroundings.
It's fascinating how Photoshop uses this intelligent analysis to predict and create pixels. Feels like the future of image editing.
It really does. It automates tasks that used to be incredibly tedious and opens up manipulation possibilities that were once unthinkable.
Okay, another transformation. Capturing huge scenes. Panoramas. How does Photoshop stitch photos together?
Photo merge. Yes, for when a single shot just can't capture the grandeur of a vast landscape or cityscape, Photo Merge takes multiple overlapping photos and intelligently combines them into one seamless, wide panorama.
How does the process work?
It's under File, Automate Photo Merge. You browse and select the series of overlapping images you shot. You need decent overlap between shots, maybe 20-40% for it to work well. Then you choose a layout option. Perspective often works well for keeping straight lines straight. Auto lets Photoshop decide. Cylindrical or spherical can be good for very wide 360-degree type panoramas. You might need to experiment if the first result isn't perfect.
And there are other options to check.
Yes, several important ones. Blend images together is crucial for making the seams invisible. Vignette removal corrects for any darkening at the edges of your individual photos. Geometric distortion correction attempts to fix lens distortions. And the really clever one is content-aware fill transparent areas. Because stitching photos often creates an irregular, wavy edge with transparent gaps, this option uses content-aware tech to automatically fill those gaps, giving you a nice rectangular final image.
So Photoshop figures out the overlaps, warps the images to match, blends the tones and colors, and even fills the gaps.
Exactly. It usually creates a new document with each original photo on its own layer, with layer masks applied to blend them seamlessly. It's incredibly sophisticated and often produces stunning results from ordinary photos. It gives you that sweeping, immersive view.
Amazing. What about fixing distortions within a single image? Lens problems or perspective issues?
Right, two key tools here, the lens correction filter and perspective warp. The lens correction filter lens correction, is designed to fix common optical flaws introduced by camera lenses.
Like what kind of flaws?
Things like barrel distortion, where straight lines bow outwards, common with wide-angle lenses. Pin cushion distortion, where straight lines bend inwards, sometimes seen with telephoto lenses. Chromatic aberration, that annoying color fringing, often purple or green along high contrast edges.
This audiobook is brought to
And
you by Sunil
vignetting,
Sharma,
where the
dedicated
corners of the
designer.
image are darker than the center.
And the filter can fix these automatically.
Often, yes. It has a database of camera and lens profiles. If it recognizes your gear, it can apply a tailored correction automatically. Or you can use the manual sliders to correct distortion, chromatic aberration, and vignetting yourself. There's also an auto-scale image option to compensate for the warping and keep the image proportions correct.
Okay, that's for lens flaws. What's perspective warp for?
Perspective warp, edit perspective warp, is more about adjusting the perceived perspective of objects within the scene. It's great for correcting converging verticals in architectural shots, making objects look like they fit the scene's perspective better, or even changing the viewpoint slightly. It's a two-step process. First, in layout mode, you draw rectangular quads or planes over the surfaces of the object whose perspective you want to change, aligning the quad edges with the object's lines.
Defining the current perspective planes.
Exactly. Then you switch to work mode. Now you can drag the corner handles of those quads, and Photoshop intelligently warps the object to fit the new perspective you're creating, making a building look straight or making an object appear properly grounded on a surface. There's also an option to automatically straighten your vertical lines.
And non-destructive again. Smart objects.
Always best practice, apply perspective warp to a smart object, and you can always go back and tweak the warp later.
So these tools let you fix reality's imperfections or bend it to your creative will.
Precisely. And speaking of creative control, the blur gallery offers some cool effects too, like iris blur, which simulates a shallow depth of field you define an elliptical focus area, and everything outside it gets progressively blurred. Or spin blur, which creates a radial blur, perfect for making wheels or propellers look like they're spinning.
Lots of ways to shape reality.
Photoshop gives you the tools, definitely.
Okay, let's shift from transforming photos to creating images. Digital painting. The mixer brush sounds special.
It really is special. The mixer brush, nested under the regular brush tool, fundamentally changes how digital painting works in Photoshop. Unlike standard brushes that just lay down color, the mixer brush simulates real painting by allowing you to mix colors on the brush with colors already on the canvas.
Like wet paint blending together.
Exactly like wet paint. You have controls for wetness, how much the paint blends. Load, how much paint brush starts with. Mix the ratio of brush color to canvas color. You can even tell it to clean brush after each stroke, or let colors build up on the brush. It also works with Photoshop's advanced realistic bristle tips, allowing you to create textures that mimic actual brush strokes, oils, watercolors. Feels much more organic.
Can you save your favorite mixer brush settings?
Absolutely. You can create custom brush presets that save the brush tip, size, all the mixer brush settings, wet, load, mix, even the color you are using. You can build your own library of favorite painting tools, organize them in groups, and even import brush packs, IBR files, created by others.
So you can mix blue and yellow on the canvas to make green.
Yep. Or load the brush with blue, then pick up some yellow from the canvas as you paint, blending them dynamically. You can also use it to paint over a photograph, using textured brushes to give it a painterly look, blending the photo's existing colors.
And there's a preview for stylus users.
Yeah, the live tip brush preview shows you the angle and orientation of the virtual bristles, which is really helpful when using a pressure-sensitive stylus and tablet for more natural control. It really bridges the gap between traditional painting and digital tools. It opens up huge possibilities for digital artists wanting that realistic media feel.
Very cool. Now what about text? Photoshop isn't just for pixels, right? It handles type really well.
Incredibly well. A key thing to understand is that type in Photoshop is fundamentally vector-based. Even though it appears on your screen rendered at the image's pixel resolution, the underlying character shapes are defined mathematically.
Like the vector graphics we talked about earlier.
Exactly, which means text layers scale beautifully. You can make text larger or smaller, resize the document, print it on a high-resolution printer, and the edges will remain perfectly sharp and crisp.
And text lives on its own kind of layer.
Yes, text layers. They behave like other layers. You can move them, restack them, change opacity, add layer styles. They have a little T thumbnail in the layers panel. And you have immense control over the type itself through the character and paragraph panels and the options bar. Font family, style, bold, italic, size, color, tracking overall letter spacing, leading, line spacing, kerning, space between specific pairs of letters, alignment, plus things like faux bold italic, all caps, small caps, underline, strike through, and anti-aliasing options for smooth edges.
Can you do fancy things like make text follow a curve?
Definitely. That's type on a path. You draw a path using the pen tool or a shape tool, then select the type tool and click on the path. Your text will flow along that curve or line. Very flexible. You can also warp text into various shapes, arcs, waves, flags, fisheyes using the warp text feature. You get sliders to control the amount of bend and distortion.
What about handling larger blocks of text like paragraphs?
Photoshop supports paragraph formatting too. You can define indents, spacing before or after paragraphs, justification, hyphenation rule, and you can save all these settings as paragraph styles, so you can apply consistent formatting to multiple text blocks easily. Great for layouts.
So it's quite a capable typesetting tool within an image editor.
It really is. And it goes deeper with open type features. Many modern fonts have built-in extras like ligatures, special combined characters like phi or fel, stylistic alternates, true fractions, swashes, decorative flourishes. The glyphs panel gives you access to all the characters available in the font, not just the ones on your keyboard.
And that match font feature sounded amazing. You can identify fonts in a picture.
Yeah, it's pretty slick. Select an area containing text in an image, even a flattened one. Choose Type Match Font. Photoshop analyzes it using AI and suggests fonts you have installed or fonts available through Adobe fonts that are visually similar. Super helpful if you see a font you like but don't know what it is.
One more text trick. Clipping masks. Using text to reveal an image.
Right. This is a great visual effect. You place an image layer, then place a text layer above it. Then you create a clipping mask. Alt-Option-Click between the layers. The image layer below will only be visible through the shape of the letters on the text layer above it, like filling the text with the image. Very popular effect.
So, Photoshop treats type not just as words, but as a powerful, flexible design element.
Absolutely. From subtle tweaks for readability to dramatic visual statements, the typographic tools are incredibly robust.
Which brings us back to those vector tools, like the pen tool. You use that for paths for text, but also for drawing precise shapes.
Exactly. Paths are the outlines of vector shapes. You can draw them with the pen tool, the freeform pen tool, which is more like drawing with a pencil, or the various shape tools, rectangle, ellipse, polygon, etc. Paths themselves are usually temporary work paths stored in the Paths panel. They don't print by default, but they're incredibly useful.
This audiobook is
And the
brought
pen
to
tool
you
is the
by
king
Sunil
for
Sharma.
precision.
It offers the
dedicated
most
designer.
control? Yes. It works by placing anchor points. Click to place a corner point for a straight line segment. Click and drag to create a smooth point with direction handles that control the curve of the segment flowing into and out of that point.
It takes practice, right?
It definitely has a learning curve. Understanding how anchor points, direction lines, and direction points work together is key. But once you master it, you can draw incredibly precise, smooth curves and sharp corners that freehand drawing just can't match. Essential for logos, illustrations, precise selections.
So let's clarify shape versus path versus pixels.
Okay. A shape in Photoshop is a vector object on its own dedicated shape layer. It has a fill and or stroke color. It's editable with the path tools. You can apply layer styles, and it scales perfectly. But you can't paint on it with pixel brushes. A path is just the vector outline itself. It lives in the Paths panel, isn't directly visible unless selected, and doesn't print on its own. Its main uses are to create selections, create vector masks, or be stroked or filled to create pixels. And pixels are the bitmap beta, the grid of squares, edited with painting tools, filters, etc., and they don't scale up well.
Got it. And Photoshop has preset shapes you can use?
Yes, the Shapes panel have libraries of pre-made vector shapes, arrows, symbols, objects. You can just drag them onto your canvas, and they become editable shape layers.
And vector masks, how are they different from regular layer masks?
Regular layer masks are pixel-based. You paint with black, white, and gray to hide or reveal parts of the layer. Vector masks use a vector path to do the same thing, the advantage. The mask edge is defined by the path, so it remains perfectly sharp and clean no matter how much you scale the layer. Great for designs that need crisp edges.
So these precise vector drawing tools, even within a photo editor like Photoshop, are crucial for graphics, masks, and type that need to scale beautifully.
Absolutely. They provide non-destructive, resolution-independent ways to create and control elements, essential for professional design workflows.
Okay, we've created our masterpiece.
Okay.
Now, how do we get it out into the world efficiently? Exporting for web and mobile, artboards.
Right. If you're designing interfaces or websites, especially responsive ones, artboards are incredibly helpful. They let you create multiple canvases representing different screen sizes, desktop, tablet, phone, all within the same Photoshop document. It makes designing and managing assets for multiple layouts much easier.
And when it's time to export those assets, export as.
Export as is the modern streamlined way. You can access it via File, Export As, or by right-clicking layers or layer groups in the Layers panel. Its purpose is to let you easily save layers, groups, or entire artboards as separate image files in various formats: PNG, JPEG, GIF, or even SVG for vector assets.
And it handles different sizes for high-res screens.
Yes, that's a huge benefit. You can set it up to export multiple versions simultaneously, like a 1x version, a 2x version for Retina displays, maybe even a 3x version. It generates all the necessary files with the correct naming conventions automatically. Huge time saver for web and UI developers.
So you could group all the layers for a button, duplicate it, change the look for a hover state, and export both groups as separate button images.
Exactly. Using layer groups to organize elements like buttons or icons, then using export as on those groups is a very efficient workflow for creating web assets.
What about automating repetitive tasks, actions?
Actions are incredibly powerful for automation. Think of them like recording a macro. You start recording, perform a series of steps, maybe resizing an image, applying a specific filter, adding a watermark, saving it as a JPEG, then closing the file. Once you stop recording, that sequence is saved as an action. You can then select that action and play it back on any other open image, or even use the batch command, file automate batch, to run the action automatically on an entire folder full of images.
Wow, that could save hours.
It really can, especially for tasks you do over and over again.
And creative cloud libraries for sharing assets.
Right. CC libraries are fantastic for keeping assets consistent across projects and collaborators. You can store colors, character styles, layer styles, graphics, logos, even linked smart objects in a library. If you use a linked smart object from a library in multiple Photoshop documents, and then you update the original object in the library, that change automatically propagates to all the documents using it, ensures brand consistency, and makes updates incredibly efficient.
So these export features, actions, libraries, they're all about streamlining the pipeline from creation to delivery.
Absolutely. Efficiency, consistency, automation, especially crucial when designing for today's diverse digital landscape with all its different devices and resolutions.
Okay, digital delivery sorted. What about the demanding world of print? Color management sounds complex.
It can seem daunting, but the core idea is simple. Ensuring the colors you see on your screen match the colors that come off the printing press as closely as possible. It's about managing expectations and avoiding expensive mistakes.
Starts with understanding RGB versus CMYK, right?
Exactly. Your screen uses RGB red, green, blue light combined to create colors. It's an additive color model, and it generally has a wide range, or gamut, of colors it can display. Printing presses use CMYK cyan, magenta, yellow, and key black inks. It's a subtractive model, inks absorb light. Critically, the CMYK gamut is generally smaller than a typical RGB gamut.
Meaning, some colors on my screen just can't be printed.
Precisely. Especially very bright, vibrant blues, greens, and reds. They might look great in RGB, but they're out of gamut for standard CMYK printing.
So how do you manage this translation? Color profiles.
ICC color profiles are the key. They are standardized descriptions of the specific color gamut. A device, your monitor, a specific printer with specific paper and ink, can reproduce. Think of them as translator files. By using profiles, software like Photoshop can more accurately simulate how colors will look on different devices and convert colors between spaces, like RGB to CMYK, while trying to maintain the visual appearance as closely as possible. You can embed these profiles in your files.
So you need to set up Photoshop's color settings correctly for print work.
Yes, under Edit Color Settings. You'd typically choose working spaces appropriate for your region and print standards, e.g. Adobe RGB for your RGB space, and a specific CMYK profile like US web-coded as SWAP v2 or one provided by your print provider. The dialog box actually explains what each setting does, which is helpful.
Can Photoshop warn you if your colors won't print properly?
Yes, using gamut warning, view gamut warning. Turn this on, and Photoshop will highlight all the pixels in your image whose colors fall outside the gamut of your current CMYK working space profile. Usually shows them as gray. It's a visual cue that those colors might shift when printed.
Okay, so you see the problem colors. Can you preview how the whole image will look when printed?
Yes, that's called soft proofing. You go to View, Proof, Setup Custom. Here, you select the specific ICC profile that represents the final printing condition, the printer, ink, and paper combination your print provider should supply this. Then, turn on view-proof colors. Your monitor will simulate how the image is likely to look when printed using that profile. You can also enable Simulate Paper Color and Simulate Black Ink for an even more accurate, though often less contrasty preview.
So you can see the potential color shifts on screen before going to print.
Exactly. This allows you to make adjustments, maybe using hue saturation or selective color adjustment layers, to gently bring those out-of-gamut colors back into the printable range while you're still in RGB mode, trying to preserve the overall look as much as possible.
And then the final step is converting to CMYK.
For traditional commercial printing, yes. Once you've made your adjustments and are happy with the soft proof, you'd convert the image using image mode CMYK color. Remember, this merges layers, unless you specifically manage channels, and permanently changes the colors to the CMYK gamut. Then you'd save it in a format the printer requires, often TIFF or PDF, sometimes PSD.
What about just printing to my desktop inkjet printer? Do I convert to CMYK?
Generally, no. Most desktop photo printers are designed to receive RGB data, and their own internal software, the printer driver, handles the conversion to their specific ink set much better than a generic CMYK conversion in Photoshop. So for desktop printing, usually keep it in RGB.
Okay, so color management is really about predictable, consistent results, especially for professional print.
It's all about avoiding surprises and ensuring what you designed is what gets printed. Less about making colors pretty, more about making them accurate across different devices.
Finally, one last dimension. Literally, 3D in Photoshop.
Yes. This might surprise some people, but Photoshop has quite robust capabilities for working with 3D models. It's not just for 2D images anymore.
How does that work?
3D layer. Essentially, yes. A 3D layer behaves somewhat like other layers, but it contains a 3D mesh, the object's geometry, along with associated materials, how the surface looks, textures or maps, images applied to the surface, and lighting information.
Can you move the 3D objects around?
Yes. The Move tool actually gains additional modes when a 3D layer is selected, allowing you to rotate, scale, and position the 3D object within the scene. There are also specific 3D camera tools to orbit, pan, and dolly your view around the 3D scene. A helpful 3D axis widget shows you the X, Y, and Z directions for orientation.
And you mentioned 3D printing from Photoshop.
Directly. Photoshop can prepare and even send 3D models directly to 3D printers or online printing services. You can specify print settings like the material, plastic, metal, ceramic, the desired quality and size. It even helps you preview and generate necessary support structures like rafts or scaffolding needed for successful printing.
So you could design a simple 3D object in Photoshop or import one, texture it, light it, and then actually get it printed physically.
That's the idea. It provides a workflow from digital 3D design to tangible object creation right within a familiar interface. Prices obviously vary a lot depending on material and size, but Photoshop facilitates the process.
Wow. That really underscores how much Photoshop has evolved. It's not just photos anymore, it's this vast creative platform.
It truly is. From basic photo fixes to complex compositing, vector graphics, typography, digital painting, web assets, print production, and even 3D, it covers an incredible amount of ground.
Okay, what a journey. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive into Adobe Photoshop. We went from the absolute basics, bitmap versus vector, through photo fixing, the incredible power of selections and layers, into those mind-bending transformation tools like Liquify and Content-Aware Fill, touched on creative painting and typography, and finally, looked at getting your work ready for the world, whether web, print, or even 3D.
It's a lot, but hopefully some key takeaways stand out. You've seen that Photoshop is way more than just a photo editor. It's a comprehensive creative suite. The concept of non-destructive editing, using things like adjustment layers and smart objects, is absolutely central, giving you incredible flexibility.
Yeah, that non-destructive part seems crucial. And the automation, actions, the intelligent features.
Huge time savers, actions for repetitive tasks, content-aware features for complex edits that used to take hours. They really streamline the workflow.
And we saw how critical careful color management and file preparation are for ensuring your vision translates accurately from your screen to the final output, whatever that may be. So as you, our listener, reflect on all this, what stands out the most to you about what Photoshop can do? Maybe a specific tool or technique we discussed.
And how might you use this renewed understanding? Could it transform how you approach your own creative ideas? Maybe enhance your photos in a new way, or even add some professional polish to a presentation for work? The possibilities are pretty vast.
Keep exploring, keep creating, and keep digging deeper into the knowledge that empowers you.